Communist China's influence on the U.S. economy and the security now reaching to the farmlands. So what's the situation? According to the Agriculture Department, by the start of 2020, last year, Chinese owner controls almost 200,000 acres of farmland in the United States, worth $1.9 billion, including land used for farming, ranching, and forestry. It doesn't seem to be a large amount yet. It's less than the farmland owned by people from other countries like Canada or Europe. It's also a small portion comparing to the total nearly 900 million acres of the American farmland. But it is the trend of increasing purchase and the buyer's potential relationship with the Chinese Communist government that has both state and federal lawmakers concerned. Chinese firms have expanded their presence in American agriculture over the last 10 years by snapping up farmland and purchasing major agro-business, such as the major pork processing giant, Smithfield Foods. Remember that? So according to a USDA report in 2018, that China's agriculture investment in other nations have grown more than tenfold since 2009. CCP has actively supported investments in foreign agricultures as a part of its One Belt, One Road initiative and aiming to control a greater piece of China's food supply chain. That is why the congressional lawmakers from both parties are looking at the measure to crack down on foreign purchasing of American farmland. Recently, the House Appropriation Committee approved a provision to USDA FDA funding bill, which is the HR 4356, to bar Communist China from purchasing more U.S. farmland. The provision also forbids the land already in the PRC's possession to be eligible to the federal programs. So let's see, the Republican congressman from Washington State, Dan Newhouse, he introduced this provision to the bill. Let's take a listen.
In recent years, the People's Republic of China's purchase of U.S. agricultural assets is a national priority for the PRC. The current trend in the U.S. is leading us towards the creation of a Chinese-owned agricultural land monopoly. Allowing this practice to continue poses an immediate threat to U.S. national security as well as U.S. food security.
So Newhouse said that by 2019, there are 81 Chinese investors in the U.S. owning nearly the 192,000 acres of farmland. This is currently no safeguard to prevent the creation of such monopoly. The only restriction on the Chinese land ownership are those imposed by the states. And right now, currently, only 6 states in the United States has such restrictions and that they can be circumvented.
I believe more needs to be done to ensure the U.S. food supply chain is secure, independent, especially after the food interruptions we all experienced during the recent pandemic. The U.S. cannot become dependent on the People's Republic of China for our domestic agricultural food supply.
The threat by the Chinese Communist Party's acquisition of the U.S. farmland, it's not only about the food chain, food supply chain. So the national security aspect of this actually also includes the potential espionage by the CCP, and you may wonder why. So actually, this comes to the story in Texas. I just found that Forbes just had a long story about that 2 days ago, too. So what happened was in early 2015, there's a company called the GH America Investment Group It is a wholly owned subsidiary of Xinjiang Guanghui Industrial Investment Company from China. They purchased more than 130,000 acres of real estate in Texas, Verde County, to build a wind farm. Okay, so the project is called Blue Hills Wind Farm. But some lawmakers and national security experts continue to express their concern about the potential national security risk. And why? So let's take a look at actually two main aspects. One is the location, as I mentioned. This proposed wind farm is the site is near both the Texas-Mexico border, which is also less than 70 miles from the Laughlin Air Force Base. So at that time, the Texas Congressman Will Hurd, which also is a former CIA officer, he spoke out against this project, cautioning that if the plan moves forward and the GH America become part of the power community, they will gain access to the security industry alert, private industry insights, and the national security threat assessment. And also the second aspect is, let's take a look at who owns GH America Energy Company. So as I mentioned, this GH America is a subsidiary of Guanghui Energy Company. So which is Guanghui Energy Company? It is owned by a former Chinese, the PLA. Okay, Chinese
People's Republic Liberation Army, so military.
Right, military officer. So his name is Sun Guangxin, and he later became the richest, one of the richest person in China. Okay, in the Xinjiang province actually.
Okay.
So his
Xinjiang
name
is where the persecution of Uyghurs is happening right now.
Right. So Dr. John Spires, the candidate for Texas Land Commissioner, he actually told me during CPAC. He said he's aware of that, and I asked him how could the Chinese purchase the farmlands in the United States, and let's take a listen to his answer.
Well, we believe what they did initially was go through a front man. What they would do is, let's say that you wanted to buy something in Texas, you might hire a company to buy it, and so it's initially registered in their name, the transaction is in their name, and they just transfer the title into theirs. It's sneaky, it's underhanded. It's hidden, but when you peel back the layers, you know exactly who's doing it. And we know it's the Chinese government. We're not going to let that happen.
Now in Texas, both federal and the state lawmakers are starting to take measures. I talked to Texas Congressman Brian Babin.
We don't know if he was able to hook up into that grid or not, but I do know that there in Austin, Texas, our great legislative two bodies, the state Senate and state House, passed legislation to see if we could stop anybody from ever tapping in to our electric grid, which we call ERCOT. And at the very least, we never want Communist Party of China to be owning lands and any possible way that they could compromise our energy grid or any part or aspect of our national security. It should never, ever happen.
Yeah, so in the federal level, the senators, Ted Cruz, and the other representatives from Texas, they introduced legislation in Congress to prohibit business owned, controlled, or receiving subsidies from China, Iran, North Korea, or Russia from purchasing land near U.S. military base. And also similarly, Representative Chip Roy, also from Texas, recently introduced another legislation to prohibit members of the CCP from purchasing real estate in the United States. So Dr. John Spires encouraged lawmakers, farmers, do not hesitate to take action to curb CCP's aggression.
Because just as we did years ago at the Alamo, facing incredible odds, insurmountable odds, men did the right thing. That's what we have to be prepared to do today. Not only here in Texas, but everywhere in the world. Doing the right thing is more important now than ever. And so I call on people everywhere. If you love liberty, if you love freedom, if you want to control your future, you want to control your destiny, you need to think like a Texan. Take charge. We'll welcome you. Don't cave in.